We'll move to item 4 on the agenda, which is a report around the integrated offender management review. If you could give me an update on that, and then if I've got any questions, I'll fire away. But over to you. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, hopefully you've had the report around our integrated offender management, or how we know it locally, IOM. But as you know, Commissioner, it involves the police and partners working together to deliver a local response to crime, targeting those offenders most at risk of offending and reducing the risk they pose to the members of the community. It's really important that we do this type of work, obviously, because we're working towards our 4 strategic intelligence assessment, but also the police and crime plan. We've changed recently, though, how we deal with IOM within West Yorkshire and about who we manage. That's the biggest change that we see here. As you know, previously, the people that we've managed on this plan, there's about 1,100 in total, but when you look at the figures, about 50% of those are currently not with us because they're away in prison. But out of those 1,100, we've had a real focus over the years around burglars and vehicle crime offenders. But the changes are more looking at a wider cohort of offenders, which include domestic abuse offenders, child sexual exploitation offenders, and general violence offenders as well. So in a nutshell, we've really widened out. So we're not targeting a bigger cohort, because we've got, obviously, a set number of officers and partnership resources that can do this. But we've just changed who we actually look at as our cohort of offenders. It's been quite timely, this review, because of new legislation that has come in under the National Probation Service and the Community Rehabilitation Company, the CRC. And what that new legislation allows us to do, just to go backwards a little bit so we can see the changes moving forwards, are that we'd have statutory offenders, which were 12 months and above in prison, and non-statutory offenders that had been given sentences of under 12 months. Moving forward, the National Probation Service and the Community Rehabilitation Company now look in relation to levels of harm. So the high-risk offenders, as you know, are still looked at by the National Probation Service, but the medium and lower risk offenders are looked at and dealt with by the Community Rehabilitation Company. So no longer does that 12-month cut-off affect how we deal with integrated offender management as a partnership. That's why we've had the timely changes moving forward. And when we talked to the HMIC that came out and inspected us a little while ago, and we're waiting for their report to come back, they were quite interested and felt that what we were doing was very creative and also innovative moving forward, to actually start to look at vulnerability as opposed to just burglary dwelling offenders. And they like the fact that we're actually looking at threat, harm and risk. So one cohort previously, now 3 cohorts within one. So the traditional burglars and vehicle crime offenders, but now the risk of harm ones come into that as well. And as I say, domestic abuse, child sexual exploitation, and we're also looking at some human trafficking offenders as well, which come into that new cohort. The new way of working also allows us to link up better with how young offenders are dealt with, to ensure that they don't fall between that gap about being a young offender and then moving into adulthood. And whilst we're leading the way in West Yorkshire with the scoring of these offenders and using Corvus to do that, other forces are now looking at how we score people to get them onto the cohort to be able to deal with them in partnership. The report talks a little bit around some satellite tagging of offenders, and we've got 70 voluntary satellite tags to be able to use, where people will come forward and agree on a voluntary basis to go on those tags. And we have about 70% of our 70 voluntary tags being used out in the community. And we've also got an information sharing agreement now in place with the electronic monitoring service as well, which has brought in some really, really good results, timely results, where they can get in touch with us quickly, we can share information, and then actually deal with what we've got in front of us. The report talks a little bit around drug testing in custody, which is linked to IOM work. And previously, we have looked at mainly drug testing in custody, burglary offenders and vehicle crime offenders. But the legislation allows us to test far more than that. There's actually 19 offences that we can test for, which include the violence offences and the domestic violence offences. So now our inspectors are looking at using the legislation and the drug testing power far wider than that, and that's bringing back a far higher hit rate, which then allows people to be on drug referral orders and actually access services. So whilst IOM, Integrated Offender Management, has changed to support that, our drug testing in custody has as well. The report that you've seen outlines some foreign national offenders as well. We have been quite low at using this system and referring people through to the database, but we've currently got a fix on niche, which is our computer system we use in custody, which will allow us to naturally do that without actually manually checking. It will automatically go through the system on the computer, which is obviously far better. So just working through then the report, how it actually looks out on district. We've had a pilot at Bradford, and the reason why we chose Bradford is that they were up for looking at change, and they had one inspector that was looking at burglar offenders and one inspector for part of their role looking at domestic abuse offenders, but actually it was about the work of one inspector. So what we've been able to do at Bradford in the pilot is have one inspector looking at the normal PPOs, the normal burglars, and the vehicle crime offenders, and that same inspector now has responsibility for the risk of harm offenders, which is the domestic abuse ones, but also the registered sex offenders as well. So it's a simple model with one inspector looking at all three cohorts. That's been rolled out at Bradford. We've reviewed what we've done at Bradford. We've taken it back to the independent advisory group at Bradford to talk to them about how we are now looking at integrated offender management, and we've taken some feedback from them because they didn't even know a lot of this work was going on in the first place, because it is quite complicated, and we accept that.
Yeah.
And that's probably the main issues and the main content from the report. I don't know if you've got any questions on that at all.
Yes, thank you for that report, and I can see that you know, as you said at the outset, some big changes have taken place with regards to the way in which integrated offender management is being undertaken, and this is something I've raised on occasion, but then I was made aware of the review, which is why clearly we've got the report today. I think you've probably already touched on this to some extent, but perhaps you could say a little bit more around the young people, how young offenders are being managed or worked with at the moment, because clearly, as you identified, that they do reach the age where they cross over into adulthood, but working with the youth offending teams as I do as well, I know that the cohort that they work with is often a difficult, yes, albeit small number of offenders, but clearly difficult to manage. So if you could say a little bit more around that. Yes,
the IOM, the Integrated Offender Management process I've just talked through there, just deals with adults, so 18 plus. But we need to obviously remember we've got the young offending teams out in the community that work in partnership with police officers, with schools, with the local authority, because their needs are quite different really. So it's really important that the two dovetail together, so therefore the young people don't fall between the gaps as they move, they turn 18, yeah. They need to continue to streamline through. We've had a lot of work done recently around our troubled families out in the 5 districts. Yeah. Every district has a troubled families team, which is police and partners and housing together, and they come together and look at who is the best agency to deal with that family. And that's just not 1 or 2 people within the family, it's the whole family, including the young people as they move through to adulthood. So there's some overlap there between the young offending team, the IOM team for the adults, and also the troubled families teams across the 5 districts. But a big part to play is with education and trying to keep these youngsters in school, so therefore they're able obviously to go and to develop in that way.
No, thanks for that. And yeah, the troubled family approach is a good one and seems to be very effective. in addressing some of those wider influences where those families are at the moment. I guess one of the concerns, certainly in discussion with the youth offending team managers, are the cuts to their budgets, not only through the comprehensive spending review, but they've recently had some further cuts in year announced, and I guess it's just a concern, I suppose, regarding the capacity and ability of the youth offending teams to work with West Yorkshire Police and others in continuing the work around this. But I don't know if there's any comment you want to make on that.
I suppose as we bring the youth offender team closer to IOM, it may be something we look at in the future. But as you're aware from your visits, they've had long-standing successes in the youth, and at the moment we need to keep them separate for a variety of logistical but more legislative issues, and the fact of the rehabilitation programmes are completely different. I mean, as Andrew says, the overall objective is that they don't have to transfer from a youth offending team into IOM because they've been through a rehabilitation.
Yeah.
But locally the districts are facing those challenges, as are the local authorities, and in year cuts don't help them. No. But they're determined that the preventative work that both these programmes have needs to continue.
Okay, thank you. So you mentioned that Bradford is the pilot district for this, and it was really just again saying a bit more around why Bradford you think have come forward as the pilot district, and in terms of reviewing the pilot work and the programme, when you expect that to be completed and who will be doing that.
Yeah, the reason why we chose Bradford was that because of the community it serves, it's got a nice range. Calderdale is a very small district, as you're aware, and Leeds is a very large district, whereas Bradford was a medium-sized district, and actually it's one inspector's workload to be able to deal with the IOM cohort. That's why Bradford was chosen, and they are quite mature in their partnership arrangements in relation to their troubled families work as well, because you'll recall they were part of the community-based budgeting pilot a number of years ago. Yeah. That's why Bradford was chosen. What we have found with working with Bradford is that we don't want the 5 districts who now come on board with this all to do different in relation to IOM. So what we've now got is we've got a strategic group that I chair. We've had our first meeting last month, we've got another meeting booked next month, and I'm chairing a strategic group to make sure as the other 4 districts come online, they're all doing similar processes in relation to IOM. They will all be slightly different because the partnership setup is slightly different, but what we really want is to keep the 5 as similar as possible. Underneath that strategic group there will be an operational group, which again will help with the Corvus scoring of the nominals, because if you are a domestic abuse offender in Bradford at such a level, a high risk level, and you get onto the cohort, the same should be the same for somebody in Leeds or in Calderdale or Kirklees. So it's really important we have that central governance, which Chief Inspector Peter Craig is leading on, to make sure we've got the scoring right for all 5 districts as they come online. So that's one change and one outcome of having a pilot. We realised we didn't want Bradford just to go it alone, we wanted them all to be on the same page.
Yeah, no, well, pleased to hear that, and I think it is right to try and get a consistent approach across West Yorkshire, because whilst I accept there are some differences in the partnerships, and and I meet with them on a regular basis, from a public perspective, it shouldn't matter which postcode you happen to live in terms of the service in this particular area that is carried out. So I welcome that approach in terms of a West Yorkshire approach.
I'm right in thinking we're working with the University of Huddersfield on some evaluation criteria around that and domestic abuse offender management as well, to try and bring some academic rigour and evidence base to the programme, to see what indicators of outcomes and measures would be, so that we can build upon the success of it, so to get an external view on it as well.
Yeah, so no, that's good to hear. In relation to baselining information, so the systems we have, and Corvus is clearly one of those, which is the system that is used in integrated offender management. Have you done any work around looking at a baseline around the financial savings potentially from this targeted approach that's been undertaken?
Yes, Peter Craig, who works in our Force Performance Improvement Unit, is currently leading a piece of work around the cost of crime and trying to look elsewhere how we cost crime, and therefore how we can ensure that our work around IOM actually correlates across and is a good value for money. So he's working with Jane Sykes, Head of Performance, and they're using a Home Office calculator called IDIOM, which has been used by the Home Office previously, I'm told, and they're looking at how that will be able to cost crime, and then because we can cost how much it costs for us to put officers into this work, how much the partnership put into this type of work, and then we can correlate them across, and we're hoping that we'll get that back early in 2016, but as yet have no results for you on that.
Okay, well that's useful to know, and I think it is important at a time of ever reducing budgets and resources that we increasingly need to demonstrate not only the benefits around hopefully trying to reduce reoffending, but obviously in terms of cost effectiveness and the outcomes around the resources that we're putting into that. So thanks for that response. Predictive policing, something I know you are aware of, and given the Operation Optimal work we've done in Leeds and West Yorkshire. But again, is there any timescales around the review around those benefits regarding some of the IT software that is being looked at as part of this project? And understanding how we might take that forward in the future.
Yeah, whilst I've got no outcome in relation to timescales, there is some vetting that's going on at the moment to allow private companies to come in to look at our data, to then be able to analyse it, to then allow us to move forward on the predictive policing. I know Jane Sykes has been working on this, and she has linked in with the ACPO lead for IOM at the time, who's from Avon and Somerset, because she's particularly looking at domestic violence offenders, but as yet with no timescale for that.
I think actually only this morning I was looking at the bids that are potentially going forward to the Police Innovation Fund, and I think this might be part of that bid. So, but we are looking at probably a more holistic approach to an IT bid rather than standalone.
Yes.
Because in terms of innovation and collaboration, I think we're going to need to be a bit bolder perhaps than what we are at the moment, and Scott Bissett was at the meeting, so he'll no doubt feed that back to you as well. In the report as well, and you touched on, Angela, the satellite traffic tracking, which appears to have significantly reduced some of the rate of reoffending for those who have taken part. Could you sort of elaborate on that a little bit more in terms of the comparative rates of reoffending for those on the satellite tracking and those that aren't?
Yeah, well, what we do know is we've had 222 offenders tagged over the last 12 months, and the length of their tag is quite varied from 6 days to over 12 months, and still on tags now. The average number of days offenders have been tagged is 77 days, so you can see it's quite wide ranging from 6 days to over 12 months, but the middle of the road is 77 days. And we believe that the majority of offenders haven't committed any offences because they haven't been back in ourselves. I've asked for a piece of work to be done around that so we can understand exactly how many. Early indications are around 80%, but the health warning on that for me is, and the cynic in me is that they haven't been caught. Yeah. But the bulk of the people that we come into contact with that are tagged have said that it certainly aided them to assist them from not offending in the future. Which is obviously work we knew anyway, but that's what they will tell us. Yeah. Okay, well that's that's very significant if those are the real figures, I accept with some caveats to that. And again,
looking at the bids, the bidding into the Police Innovation Fund, satellite tracking is one of those. But again, looking at how we can utilise tracking into areas around missing persons, for example, or the vulnerability agenda. So I think there's a lot more we could probably do with satellite tracking in this area of work and other aspects of policing and public safety. Just to touch on the foreign national offenders, which you again highlighted within the report, do we know why we've only got 10 or 15% of these offenders checked for previous convictions?
We do understand that now that we've looked at it. It was only 10 to 15%. Currently the last rerun of the data shows us at about 26%. And that is because it has to be a manual, an extra check by the staff in the custody suites when the individual comes in. And with the churn of sergeants working in the custody suites, it's another bit of training to tell them about and remind them about. So whilst 26% now is not where we want to be at all, what we have been able to do is secure a niche upgrade, so therefore they will automatically be checked when they come into custody moving forward, which should get us somewhere near to 100%, you would hope.
And do you know how quickly that might be achieved? Or
I'm told it's in progress. I would certainly hope it will be later on this year, within the next 6 weeks.
Right. I mean, that's important because, I mean, clearly, with everything that's going on, I suppose, in the world at the moment, never mind in this country, and obviously we had the very horrific case recently of the offender that was traced back to the Czech Republic, and fantastic work by our detectives to track him down and bring him to justice. But clearly the number of foreign nationals in West Yorkshire and elsewhere is quite fluid and has increased in recent years. So I think the process and procedures that need to be in place clearly need to be, in my view, rigorous, not only to UK nationals but to foreign nationals as well.
I suppose the positive is around the fingerprint recognition is automatically checked to foreign nationals when they go onto the database, and the other bit we were looking at is the previous convictions, which again is equally as important to us. As Angela says, we're aiming to get it up to 100%. But in terms of once they've gone onto the LiveScan database, assuming that the international and certainly the European process have been followed, that's our backstop. But it's the conviction thing that we now want to improve as well.
And just a related question to that, in terms of out-of-court disposals, is there a process in place regarding the checking of previous offending history for those types of incidents as well?
Well, that's where we'll have to revert to a manual process again. So we'll automate it for brought into custody, but we'll still have a challenge and a training need about making it part of the out of the voluntary attendance process. The idea at the moment is, because all of those will be recorded through Niche, we'll be able to put still the same automated check-in system in. But as we've reported on previously, the challenges around DNA and biometrics around those are still there. I suppose the reassurance there is to go through a voluntary attendance generally is the lower harm crime, is the lower risk to individuals and other people type of crime. But it certainly will be through Niche with the solution, but we're not there yet with that.
Yeah, I mean, I accept that in terms of the assessment of a lower risk in terms of an out-of-court disposal, but nevertheless, I'm sure you can imagine if there was to be a serious incident related to one of those offenders subsequently, then, clearly questions will be asked. So I think, trying to get the processes in place as soon as we can, the better. And I know you've made references to Niche, the Niche system, on a number of occasions. And I think I'm right in saying there's about 20 odd police forces that are on Niche in England and Wales. And I'm just wondering if you are looking at collaborative approaches with those other niche police force areas to actually try and overcome some of these process and technical issues that appear to be...
Yeah, there's 22 forces on niche now. We collaborate inter-force through inter-sort of server cross-referencing and some sharing of information. But the national collaboration scheme is called Operation Minerva, which we're signed up to, and that's where we're looking at business processes across the country and prioritising the niche upgrades to ensure that, for example, the automated check of foreign nationals is done across the country and nationally. So we're in as part of the Minerva group and a part of the, in many ways, setting the standards in some of the areas, but also learning off some of the other forces as to what they're doing.
Okay, thanks for that. I think just a comment that the Safer Communities Fund they established through the proceeds of crime monies, pleased to say that I've been able to allocate a number of projects that are contributing hopefully into the reduction in reoffending into the integrated offender management project. And you know, I've visited a number of these projects that have it's been really good to see the work on the ground in the local areas with the police that is happening, so hopefully that will continue into the future as well. Okay, I haven't got any more questions on that report, so thanks for that.